You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Bringing you the news and views and the untold side of the Palestinian struggle for freedom from a Palestinian perspective.
Good morning, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered. I'm honoured to be joined by a couple of great friends of Palestine, two founding members of the Jewish Council of Australia, Sarah Schwartz and Dr Max Kaiser. Good morning, guys.
Morning, Nasser.
Morning.
Thanks for having us on.
It's great. I really appreciate you both being here. Perhaps as a starter, maybe in how you got to Palestine?
I guess I grew up in an environment which was, there was very much unquestioning support for Israel. Like, Palestinians weren't really spoken about, thought of. I don't think I really learnt about the real history of Palestine and Israel till after I left high school. But I was always really interested in social justice and human rights and anti-racism work, and went to university, got involved in activism there, and found myself in a lot of difficult conversations around Israel and Palestine, where I realized I just didn't know any of the history. And I guess over many years felt like I had to grapple with it. I had to read. I met Palestinians who introduced me to a lot of great literature and books and art. I guess that was the start of my learning or undoing what I had learnt previously.
Max?
For me, I think a slightly different story to Sarah, because I guess Israel didn't necessarily feature that strongly in my education upbringing, even though I was brought up Jewish. It wasn't like my family was particularly enamored with Israel or Zionist at all, although, yeah, we certainly had some connections, and it was sort of in the background there. I guess, yeah, I also just didn't know that much. And I'd probably say that it was a little bit earlier than when I got to university. It was more around like the time of the Iraq War, where I really had a bit of a political consciousness shift and started reading up everything that I could. And then becoming, I think, much more critical of US, Western powers, Australia participating in wars, and then sort of going from there on a bit of a, Noam Chomsky
Deep dive?
binge, and ending up, learning a lot about Palestine, and then more in university and getting involved in, different anti-racist groups and campaigns, and meeting lots of, different people and hearing more.
The JCA, Jewish Council of Australia, we'll put a link to that in the podcast. It's fantastic that it's here now and it's got the voice that it does. How did it get to there? What got you all together to create it?
It's a good question. I feel like it really came about through conversations and chats in the pub about what we could do in this moment. I think, like, for me personally, I can't imagine forming an organisation like this if it wasn't for what we were witnessing take place in Gaza. I think that was the real impetus, and at least for me, one of those moments where it was like, okay, what is the most that I can do in this moment as a Jewish person to lend my voice in support of Palestinians, but also to push back against this really harmful, this harmful weaponization of anti-Semitism, this harmful discourse around Jewish people that in some ways I think really requires us as Jewish people to dissent, to voice our dissent, to say, that this is not an accurate portrayal of us and that it is harmful to Palestinians. And so, I think that's how it really came about, and sort of this need. I guess we really thought that we wanted to create an organisation which was a real player in the media space and a player in the political space as well, that we could, use as an organisation to challenge some of the media discourse, to be able to interact with government bodies, with other institutional bodies, and challenge some of these harmful discourses from institutional point of view.
Structured space. I mean, as opposed to just our solidarity groups, this is a far more quote unquote professional outfit. I'm interested in, you actually articulated the thinking, almost a business case, we must, and therefore this is what it looks like.
We had these early ideas and sort of strategy sessions about what we wanted to do, and definitely things changed a lot just as we were putting it together. Like we had a few months of sort of planning, and then it really was just sort of trying to respond to the need. And then once it actually launched, we had a really great response, and a lot of people contacting us, Jewish people, non-Jewish people, saying how much they supported it, and I guess also directing us in terms of what we should be speaking out on and what topics we should be addressing. Like, so for instance, we kind of had this line at the start where we were sort of more strictly, the main thing that we wanted to do was to interrupt the discourse that anti-Semitism, the conflation of criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, and that was going to be, basically our sole focus was to really just try to take that down and to have a better, clearer definition of anti-Semitism, which was about racism, not against Jewish people, not about criticizing a state. But then we sort of changed tack a little bit because people really wanted to hear a strong Jewish voice speaking out against Australian government foreign policy and asking the Australian government to take a much stronger stance than they have in order to put international pressure on Israel. We've shifted strategy and things a few different times and gone hopefully a bit where, our supporters and sort of the broader movement think that we can be useful.
And so was the thinking being done before October and then got turbocharged, or?
I guess I'd had conversations before October about, and thought about the way that Jewish institutional bodies, ECAJ, the various Jewish Board of Deputies, just not only really conservative, but also just engage in this really abhorrent lobbying for Israel in a way that sort of invokes the entire Jewish community and makes us all complicit in what Israel is doing, and how they sort of weaponize Jewish identity to bolster their support for Israel. And, that institutional space, they're all that really exists. We have some really amazing anti-Zionist, non-Zionist groups that have always been around and that have always been in solidarity with Palestinians, but there was never anyone that was really challenging them at that more bureaucratic or structural level. But I think October just turbocharged everything, because after October, it was just so clear that these groups were going to continue to beat the drums of war like nothing else, and they weren't going to take pause at all. And we saw what we think is an unfolding genocide taking place in Gaza, and I think that really put the fire under us to do something about it and to do something big and put ourselves out there. Like, when we started talking about the group, I think at the beginning none of us wanted to put our names to it. We knew what kind of backlash we'd get. Our first idea was to, just create an organisation, put out statements, not have anyone's face or name attached to it. We got quickly told that would not get us we wouldn't be able to do anything, and that no one would take us seriously. It took a lot to get us to this stage, to put ourselves out there.
It's like jumping into a cold pool. Once you jump in, a few seconds later, you're warm. Now that you're out. And whilst there is a pain, there's also, there's a liberation too.
I mean, definitely. And we've forged so many strong links and partnerships, and met people who have been so appreciative of us and wanting to work with us from all different Palestine solidarity groups, from different Muslim groups and advocacy groups. It's been definitely rewarding, definitely finding, I guess, some new community, and even in the Jewish community as well. I mean, it's not just us, it is the other left anti-Zionist groups, but there's definitely a sense of people finding each other and forming new communities of solidarity. And if I wasn't doing this, and if I didn't have this opportunity working with great people like Sarah, I would be even more despairing than I currently am. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to find a home. There is an excommunication. It's not a gentle departure from the community.
I really take heed in what Max has always said about there being sort of multiple Jewish communities, but I think we also have to be realistic that there is a very large portion of the Jewish community who not only doesn't like the work that we do, but doesn't, wants to excommunicate us, wants to silence us, wants to bully and taunt and dox us and all of these things. And yeah, it's very painful. I kind of had this weird experience where before launching the Jewish Council, I gave a speech at a rally in Naam, a Palestine Solidarity rally, and that speech went viral amongst many Jewish people that I knew, and that was, I guess, my big outing. And I guess, yeah, that experience was alienating and painful, but it also meant that I connected to so many people who I just would never have connected with before through that speech, and through the Jewish Council work. Had so many people who I went to school with, who I grew up with, who grew up in really similar circumstances, message me. I've been meeting them regularly. Some of them have started to come along to the rallies on Sundays. I mean, that's been such a special experience. I feel like I'm more true to, it's good that all these people know where I stand. Yeah, I kind of feel like my only regret was not having these sort of debates and conversations sooner with people I knew who would disagree with me, because it is harder to have them now, but it has been a source of loss, but also finding that new community, which is pretty amazing.
One time I was with the Loud Jews on a Sunday rally, and there was a young girl there, and she was really timid, was wearing a face mask. I said hello. And during the rally, somebody else told me that this was a young girl who'd gone on TikTok and was doing some TikTok stuff and said something, no, 40 beheaded babies. And then in the TikTok, they've gone, no, that's a lie. Just randoms. And she's gone, no, it's true. They did beheaded babies. And there was this, listen, just go Google and come back to the game. Mm. And so she Googled and went back to the game and said, I can't play anymore. I've got to do some more research. And she spent the next X whatever days, weeks doing some extra research. Year 11 at Bialik. And she's going to the rallies, but in disguise, because it's not easy once you've come out to actually leave. Though, when you sit out here as a Palestinian, I know that I've had with Jewish folk who've gone, not the devil. I've never felt safer than amongst Palestinian siblings. And then I look at Jewish Voices of Peace closing down, Central Station, not in my name, all in their T-shirts. Are we that much more Zionist in Australia, and particularly Melbourne and Sydney, than New York?
Yeah, definitely than New York. Yeah, it's pretty inspiring to see what sorts of things they can do. And I think in New York, it's even gotten to that next stage where, there's anti-Zionist synagogues, and there's a whole sort of, anti-Zionist sort of social infrastructure, and people are very supportive of each other. And then, more broadly, like you see in the States, there's I think, I can't remember what the exact stat is, but it's sort of if you look at Jews, particularly under 30, there's just half of people who basically think that Israel's an apartheid state, is committing genocide, would agree with the things that we do. We don't have any great polling and data about the Australian Jewish community, and certainly not recently.
Surely August could tell you exactly what.
But 100% of their members.
Yeah, all the.
We should just explain to listeners. August is the Australian Union of Jewish Students. Polished student union. I mean, they're good at what they do.
I mean, groups like August, I remember them from university. And as soon as you start questioning Israel, you're not welcome in their spaces. Mm-hmm. You're not go. I mean, it's not that you're not welcome; you're not going. And I feel like I know so many Jewish people who went on similar journeys to me, might not have ended up in the same place, but were critical of Israel as soon as they learned more when they went to university, and then they never went to an August event. They're great at keeping in their own people and enforcing the boundaries of what they say is respectable political discourse or respectable discourse around Israel. According to them, I'm sure that maybe you're allowed to say that you don't particularly like Netanyahu, but that's kind of the limit. And then after that, it's if you have any sort of structural criticism of Israel, well, then you've like gone outside, you know, you're unjewed, you're whatever, you're kicked out. If you want to have an organization which is unwelcoming, then sure, but it's like not a particularly good community or religious organization. If you actually want to have multiple political perspectives.
Yeah, and they say that they're open, that they're a pro-Israel Zionist organization. And what you know, one small stat that we do know is that 30% of Australian Jews, at least, don't identify as Zionists. It's not an organization for them. Presumably, it's a growing number of Jews on campus, don't see AUGIS as representing them.
Stay locked to 3CR.
So that 30% that don't see themselves as Zionist, but are culturally Jewish or religiously Jewish, but don't want to associate with the concept of Zionism as Israel represents it. Where do they? I mean, we don't really see them. They're quiet.
Yeah, well, if you dig into the stats a little bit, like a lot of the people who don't identify as Zionist are religious. So it's just not they wouldn't have that identification with this sort of secular political identity. They would identify with, basically with other things and not see that as the primary part of their Jewish identity. They're not necessarily going to be loud and proud and out there. Definitely doesn't mean that just because you're not Zionist doesn't mean you're in solidarity with the Palestinian. Yeah, exactly. So that's an issue. But I think the other thing is that, and we have to remind people of this all the time, is that despite there being a lot of Jews and people talking about Jews in the media in Australia over the last year or so, the Jewish community is really small. Like it's about 100,000 people. And there's sort of an oversized emphasis, I suppose, on Jews and Jewish political opinion in Australia. That, like, The Guardian the other day quoted like 6 different like Jewish groups on, I can't remember what it was. So and there's some of them are fairly small. So it's sometimes it gets a little bit skewed.
Well, Max, if you say that too much, you might be just a bit of an anti-Semite. I mean, I know you're asked to condemn. We had the Australia's version of the McCarthy trials in the Senate on Friday, a week ago. Tell us a little bit about your experience, Sarah, sitting in the Senate in Canberra, being grilled and asking to condemn.
Yeah, that was the first question that we got asked by Senator Sarah Henderson, who was wearing a yellow ribbon and who...
We should tell listeners the yellow ribbon is to be in solidarity with the hostages.
But not with Palestinians. I mean, she's also someone who has said that she doesn't think that there is a rise in Islamophobia. There's no issue with Islamophobia. And she's also someone who has attended AJA events with this right-wing extremist Jewish organisation. And I think her first question of us, or at least one of the questions, was asked us if whether we condemn anti-Semitism, which is really absurd. Like, as if an organisation which says that it's opposed to anti-Semitism is going to be like, we're cool with it. She also asked us if we condemn the swatch sticker, which
pronunciation.
The swatch sticker.
Watch version or the...
No, I think she was trying to say swastika. It was confusing, and it did kind of throw Liz and I. Dr. Elizabeth Strakos was there and kind of confusedly responded, like, "Of course we don't support the swastika." And then we got grilled by Senator Paul Scar, who had like a list of talking points that he'd clearly been given from ECAJ, including about how amazing ECAJ was and how they have all these aged care facilities and other organizations that are under their umbrella, and like, why, we're clearly outsiders. And it's like, when we don't have any aged care facilities, we just launched, like, give us some time, Paul.
So if you don't have aged care facilities, you couldn't possibly be a legitimate voice.
We couldn't possibly, I guess, like, and it's so telling, because what he doesn't realize is that what he's really saying is like, you aren't the official body. I'm actually not here to hear from a diversity of Jews. I just want to hear from the Jews that I like. And your experiences aren't real Jewish experiences. You don't have any legitimacy to speak here, despite the fact that there are like so many other witnesses who are also from small organizations, some of whom also have the World Council in them. I think it really showed up that the coalition doesn't really care about racism or Jewish experiences at all. It cares about bolstering its support for Israel. And that's exactly what that Senate inquiry into whether there should be a judicial inquiry is about. It's about putting this gloss over the entire Palestine solidarity movement and, you know, defaming the whole movement and saying that it's anti-Semitic as a distraction from what we're witnessing unfold in Gaza.
And I mean, I watched it. I wouldn't commend anyone to go and download it off the Senate website. But there was a point where he was really quite forcefully interjecting.
Yeah. He started shouting about, he said, you haven't got one example of your lived experiences of anti-Semitism in your 13-page submission, which was like an academic submission about why they shouldn't have a judicial inquiry. And then when I told him that we do experience, you know, the types of anti-Semitism that he spoke about, he just started shouting and was like, but you've not put one example in this submission. And it was like, sorry, Paul, I'm not going to like tell you all my like lifetime experiences of anti-Semitism. I don't know if like a coalition inquiry into like this trumped up sham judicial inquiry is the right place for me to like give you my personal story.
Max, what are your thoughts? I mean, the reality is on campus today, the hardest thing to be is a black fella or a hijabi woman or anyone really of color. Not to discount anti-Semitism, not to discount a rise in it, but to say there's no anti-Palestinian racism, Islamophobia, and all the other sorts of hate. I mean, if you're a trans woman, what about everybody else? Why the exceptionalism?
Yeah, totally. I mean, universities are like, this sort of like little compressed microcosm of the rest of society. And it is where, certainly I remember people in my tutes saying like just racist things pretty openly. Some of them are now liberal politicians. And, I went to Melbourne Uni. It's very elite, place, a lot of private school kids. Yeah, like this sort of stuff is fairly rife in different circles. So of course it's going to reflect some of the racism in broader society. And that's a real issue when we pretend that it's something that only affects Jewish students. The thing that I've been thinking about recently as well, which is sort of a little bit the elephant in the room, is that a lot of what we are talking about, there's definitely, I'm sure there has been anti-Semitic incidents. Some of them may have been related to the encampments or whatever. A lot of the time when we hear, when we go through some of these stories and really like dig down to what people are talking about and their fears, they talk about, someone like chants of free Palestine or seeing someone wearing a keffiyeh or a Palestinian flag and sort of experiencing fear from that. And it's hard to sort of get away from the idea that there might be some racism, that anti-Palestinian racism informing that. So we've got a few different things going on here. And I think that have been some, limited good examples of where there has maybe been some more respectful dialogue between different groups and where, people have like that great example that you had of the Bialik student, learning and sort of getting outside of that kind of fearful zone. We need a lot more of it. And definitely in terms of tackling racism as a whole on universities, it's in fact, what we argued is that it'll be counterproductive to have this judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism because, it just sort of makes it seem as if anti-Semitism is this special thing, singles it out, singles Jews out and for special treatment in a way that doesn't benefit anyone.
I don't know how many times I've said it, the same people that are actually anti-Semitic, they don't like brown people, they don't like queer people, they don't like yellow people, orange people, every other people, they only like themselves. And the fight against that hate is better when we're all together, not when anyone's exceptionalized. Jill Siegel, appointed as our anti-Semitism czar. I don't know the woman, but, she's not been shy and having a crack at me and the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network, etc. But she's a lobbyist and partisan. Should they make me the Islamophobia envoy to balance things out?
one stage they maybe have exhausted all their other candidates.
Doesn't seem like anyone wants to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to. I think that might be the challenge.
And rightfully so, because they've hats off to whoever takes that role in some ways, because, are they going to be able to call out the inherent anti-Palestinian racism if in, in stuff that the lobby is saying, the Israel lobby is saying, like if people like ECAJ are campaigning for Palestinian voices not to be heard in the media, like this appointed anti-Semitism envoy has engaged in that lobbying to silence Palestinian voices, is that not a form of anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia, that erasure? And that would be a really tough gig to have to be in that position and to have to, call out some of the language that's being used by the very institutions that you're a part of within that position as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much for the chat. Sarah Schwartz and Dr. Max Kaiser of the Jewish Council of Australia. There'll be a link to their website. Is there a way people can support you and join your mailing list?
Go to our website, join our mailing list, and you can donate some money if you like. We have to say donations are not yet tax deductible, but we're working on it.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, Nasser.
Share the podcast, tell your friends, and remember, there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast. If you found it valuable, please consider donating or subscribing to support independent community.